It's a dawning of a new week and a new era for the Pittsburgh Steelers and many other teams around the National Football League. Many players, many college players now having their dreams come true as members of the National Football League, or at least getting a chance to be a member of the National Football League, as we are now the Monday after the NFL draft. So we get to play Monday morning quarterback here on Mic'd Up on Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Steelers Now. Even we're going to talk a Mountaineer that wasn't drafted, so WV Sports Now as well. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and Mic'd Up is presented by Martin Lawn Services at 412-849-5894. My co-host is Mike Vukovcan, and Mike, what an interesting weekend it was. We had nice weather. I got to enjoy myself a little bit there, do some yard work as well, but it was obviously a busy weekend for us covering the NFL draft. I was doing a 9-hour gauntlet of a broadcast through 2 days.
Yeah, I want to interrupt you. Hey, Mike, I want to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Just want to tip of the cap to you and Cal and Nick and Alan. You guys did a hell of a job with the 2 days of draft coverage, the amount of hours you did, and just to be able to keep that going and talking. Better than we did last year.
Yeah.
Just great job by you guys, manning the ship there, and just wanted to give you some recognition there. That was a great job by you as the host.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. Yeah, I was the only one who didn't get to take a bathroom break at all. No, yeah, absolutely. I think it went smoother than last year because last year we were kind of still figuring things out. We just started quarantine and all that. I think it went smoother. We had something to say the whole time. I couldn't have done it without Nick, especially Nick Kale as well. And Alan was there mostly Thursday night, but then not as much Friday because the multiple picks for the Steelers. So still getting that insight from the Zooms. It went well, I thought, for sure. And it was a draft show, a draft gauntlet of a show that was aided by some trades, some intrigue, some even drama going into the draft and some things that didn't happen. And then a Steelers draft that resulted in a polarizing discussion because they had a board fall in their lap in multiple rounds, and they had to make some tough decisions. We are going to talk about our thoughts about how the Steelers did, the Steelers draft grade, and then, as I said, some college players around the region that are now getting a chance in the National Football League, how they're going to do, and then maybe a couple who didn't get, as I guess many teams biting on them, as many would have thought, and the differences there between those. So, Mike, the Steelers draft is over. They get their running back, and it really appeared like everyone discussing it, everybody pondering. I was kind of thinking maybe Tevin Jenkins made more sense. People thinking maybe it wouldn't be Najee. He wouldn't be there. He was there. And they handed in the draft card in 30 seconds. Teams are letting the clock run out. They're sprinting on the stage for most of these picks. Najee Harris, running back out of Alabama, and he stayed for a senior year, which was big, winning a national title. We have that video on PSL. But he ends up being the Steelers' first-round pick. Then they draft Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. Again, Corey Geiger was able to assist us with that coverage there at Nittany Sports Now, so it's a Penn State product. Filling running back and tight end. They then fill out center. They then get an edge rusher. They round out the draft. They even draft a punter and trade a pick late. They do fill some needs for sure, but there are some people who feel like that separate from not loving a running back as a first-round pick, but maybe being okay with that center needed to be addressed earlier than it was. Maybe they passed on a guy like Humphrey for Freiermuth. Maybe you get a tight end later, maybe not needing to jump on him. Edge rusher was a need, but it wasn't addressed until the end and probably unlikely to actually be on the roster, but we'll see. Obviously, the trade at the end, despite needing the draft capital, it's not a draft that anybody, I don't think, is saying the Steelers sucked in or they failed or they did horrible, but it's certainly split in terms of whether it's an A, B, etc. What grade would you give this Steelers draft? And what are your just overlying thoughts on this draft? Because we did 9 hours of broadcast, but you weren't a part of those. So I definitely want to give you some time to give your thoughts.
Well, I would give them a high B,
okay,
maybe B plus. I thought they filled all their needs. I think everything that we talked about that they needed. The only thing that I thought that maybe they didn't address, but I kind of think that one of these undrafted free agents like Shakur Brown or Mark Gilbert might help with the Steelers with cornerback. And I also wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's some still veteran cornerbacks out there. Steven Nelson still hasn't signed yet with a team.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah,
Right.
I think there's some veteran guys out there that if they pick that up, I think that'll be okay, and that's going to be a high priority for next year. But I like what they did. I really did, Mike. I think everyone that talks about everyone is so focused on the now in this season. I think the Steelers set themselves up with a tight end or a tight end that's going to be their tight end, an all-around tight end that's going to be their. They don't have to address that anymore.
He's good. He really is good. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, a guy that is not like nothing against Eric Ebron, but Eric Ebron's not a blocker.
Right.
Freiermuth can do both. He's not going to drop a pass. He's reliable. I love Najee Harris. I don't care what anyone says. He makes the offense better. He makes Ben Roethlisberger better. He makes the defense better. And then the center, we'll see. They address the position. People like the guy. And I have no problem. I think Kendrick Green could turn into something. He has a quickness. He has some nasty to him. And the left tackle, Dan Moore, he was part of the best offensive line in college football last year. He's a little bit of the development, but he's a guy that –
yeah, because you can be masked in that. You can't be covered up.
He doesn't need to come in and play this year. If he develops quickly enough, maybe he will by the end of the year. But he's maybe more of a pick for 2022.
Right.
I really like their draft. I really do. I think they got a punter.
Which was kind of surprising, honestly, to see a punter draft, especially for what we're going to talk about later, that some defensive linemen, linebackers, etc., weren't drafted at all, and a punter ends up getting drafted. But it's in a need. They have had to address it. Jordan Berry and the Funky Bunch have been punting for a couple of years now. They've actually signed and dropped Jordan Berry twice in the last 2 years. They got to make a decision on somebody.
Exactly. And now we're going to find out. This guy was the best punter in college football last year. So when you're getting the best at something, the way I look at it is they got themselves the best running back in college football last year. They got one of the best tight ends in college football. They got the best punter. The only pick that I would maybe question a little bit, not so much trading up, but the 5th round pick, because he's more of a project. Other than that, I think they possibly got a slot cornerback to replace Mike Hilton with Trey Norwood or one of the other guys. I'm a big fan. The guy that I texted Alan right away as soon as they signed him is Mark Gilbert, the guy out of Duke. He's an undrafted free agent. When he was either a freshman or a sophomore, he was first team ACC. Really good. And then he got hurt. He hurt his hip, or he had some sort of injury, and that held him back for a couple of years. If that guy is, I told Alan, if that guy's healthy, he will make the team and he will be a contributor.
Okay.
So we'll see it. And a lot of people like the pick out of Michigan State, Shakur Brown. Some people had him rated as high as a 4th round pick, and the Steelers get it as an undrafted free agent. So I get hats off to Kevin Colbert. Of course, we're never going to know until 1 or 2 years down the line.
Sure.
I think they addressed everything that they needed to address.
Yeah, it was funny, actually, because I put up a post on Steelers Now. What grade would you give to fans? And the immediate replies on Twitter were, I'll see you in 3 years. I'll let you know in 3 years. Like, I get it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to fairly grade this for years down the road, but that's still what we do here. You just got to analyze and throw a grade out there right away. I don't hate the draft by any means. I think B-, B+. I'm definitely not going to drop below B. I don't think I can go A. And as much as you brought up and you hit the nail on the head in terms of it's a good draft for sure when you get the best player on your board at a position consensusly in the NFL coming out of college. Everybody agrees. Najee Harris was number 1 running back. Freiermuth not number 1, but really number 2 tight end. And I got to say, really a number 1 tight end in terms of an actual tight end position, actually blocking and catching. The only one in front of him was basically a receiver who's playing the tight end position. So you could certainly make the argument you're making that he still is the number 1 tight end. You're getting number 1 players on boards at positions. My only concern is, and this is a hypothetical that Kale actually brought up on the broadcast, that based on how the draft unfolded, and the Steelers had to make the tough decision that's going to make it great for us and going to be conversation forever. It wasn't that anyone was taken. The board kind of fell in front of them to where they would have to make decisions because there were some picks that people were reaching. or kind of some surprise picks in front of the Steelers in both the first, second, and even the third round, that the Steelers could have drafted, say, Tevin Jenkins, and then they could have drafted Humphrey, who would have been the number 1 center on most boards. They ended up with probably the number 3 or 4 center getting later on. And maybe they could have got Sermon as a running back instead of Najee Harris. Najee Harris, much better, but Sermon could have been a good enough back, and your O-line would have then been improved to help out. They certainly helped the running game. It feels to me, because they were 11-0 at one point, they did win a division, they were a playoff team, that they feel like that even for next year, because this draft was for now and the future, which is for sure the case. They had to do it that way. That's how they did it. But even for next year, it seems like they think that if they improve the running game, they could go from losing in the first round to winning a playoff game or two. And it's not to say that's crazy, but I think there are other variables there this year that didn't exist last year with some players that they lost. So they really focused on improving the running game. They had to, I think maybe a little bit too much in terms of they could have improved it without having to go at it that way. And you do still have the concern of a first-round pick. Even if he's a great running back for 3 or 4 years, it is rare to sign a second contract. Normally, first-round picks do, which is why you had that situation. But I think it's a good draft for sure. It's a good draft. We'll see if it's a great draft. I don't think anyone picking at it or being mad or saying that I don't know what they're doing, that's not legitimate. This was a solid draft. They did well. The future is there. They're definitely a better team today than they were before the draft. Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin seem totally in sync on their thought process in the draft. I also was surprised, though, on trading away a pick to trade up for somebody that's a project, just because Kevin Colbert had said that he does not like to trade anything in the draft unless he has 5 players that could be taken depending on what goes on. And they did trade up to get Devin Bush a couple years ago, but obviously there was a lot of player movement, and they just love Devin Bush, and that's been a great pick so far. But I would find it hard to believe that at that point in the draft, there were so many players that they could have just taken anybody and loved it. They had to have some they're narrowing in on. So that was odd that they.
So he said he also addressed that and said that
the compensatory pick too. They're going to probably
they really wanted a 5th-round pick. I think they wanted to have bodies in this year, and they're very likely with the losses that they endured this year that
right.
they pick up comp picks. So I think that's
fair. Yeah, they did bring that up.
Yeah, it's going to kind of be a wash. I'll say this, Mike, and I was saying this to a buddy of mine when we were talking about the draft. I think the obituary that many people are writing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it's very, very
could be
premature.
Schedule will be harder next year, though. That's the only thing.
But
yeah.
I will say this. I don't know that there's a better. There might be somebody as good. I don't know that there's a better offense in the AFC North than the Pittsburgh Steelers. When you look at what they have the lineup at receiver,
right? Yeah, they're deep.
Tight ends, running back. I'll take my chances with the Steelers skill position players, and even with this offensive line, I think we're going to see maybe the philosophy of Matt Canada is possibly going to aid this offensive line, and I think a healthy David DeCastro. Everyone knew he played all last year. Hurt. Villanueva is gone. I just think they're going to be, the line can't be worse than they were last year.
That's I will say the line and the running game cannot be worse. No way. So that's true.
If that's the case, I'll take my chances with the Steelers 4 or 5 wide receivers, this new tight end that's who will also aid the running game because he can actually block.
Get ready for 2 tight end sets. They talked about Eric Ebron wanting to be a part of 2 tight end sets last year. Vance McDonald just not that guy. They can do 2 tight end sets now.
Yeah, and Freiermuth could actually block and be an asset there, and Ebron can worry about pass catching, which he's good at. And, I'm telling you, a running game is going to help Ben Roethlisberger, and if he's healthy, that's the only caveat.
That's the X factor, Ben. If he's healthy and if he plays well enough, right?
He doesn't need to even be 100%. If he's healthy and not hurt, this offense is going to be potent. And the return of Devin Bush. I honestly believe this. This is no fan talking here. I don't this talk that the Steelers are going to be one of the worst teams in the league. You brought up a point, and it's very valid. Is the schedule is a killer.
They're a division champion. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to face a killer schedule next year. However, I like this. I like this as it stands right now. This draft made them better, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're not done adding people to the roster now that the draft is over.
And you always knew they had so many needs. You always knew they were going to come out of the draft still needing something, but I think they filled the most important needs. I will say the center position might still be not as guaranteed as some would have liked, which is maybe why some would have rather than drafted Humphrey and then maybe not have – you want to get Freiermuth. He's great, but getting him does make you have a center position that's not as guaranteed. There has even been a conversation of DeCastro moving if this doesn't work out with Green. We'll see. That's certainly something they need to figure out. But there are many that like Kendrick Green. For example, Nick Fairbaugh, draft analyst, loves Kendrick Green. He's okay with how they did the draft. So we will see. The Steelers, though, have needs still, but they're still going to be – I don't think they're all of a sudden going to be a 2-win team. They're going to be a good contending team. It will depend on if Ben is healthy enough. And honestly, this might sound really crazy, Mike. I'm not saying I want to give him the keys to the Cadillac or he's a franchise guy, but Mason Rudolph did play well enough last year that if Ben would get hurt, I don't think it would be as bad as it was 2 years ago with Mason and Duck where they couldn't move the ball. I think Mason wouldn't give him the best offense in the league, maybe not in the division, but I think with the weapons that are there, how deep they are, the fact that they would have a solid running game, the fact that they would have more receivers than he had 2 years ago. Juju was hurt 2 years ago, if you remember as well. They would still be better. I think he'd be in a better position to succeed even without Ben than they would have been 2 years ago. So they still could potentially make a playoff run because there are 7 spots now, not 6 after starting that last year. It will be a hard schedule though, and the only other blessing in disguise maybe to help Steeler fans, there's always a conversation on the Steelers play down to opponents, and they always get upset a few times throughout a year, and that's why they're not a number 1 seed. That's why they had to go on the road to New England so many years in big games in the playoffs. If the schedule's tough all the way through, maybe they're going to respect all the opponents and they won't have to get, lay an egg every other week. And maybe they're actually beat some teams more than they would have thought. So I think it was a good draft. We won't know for sure until it plays out. Tomlin and Colbert both are around. They seem invigorated by this. You could even see their body language from even last year's Zooms. They seem to be excited. Colbert did not choose to retire. He bucked what many thought he was going to do. Tomlin signed for more years. Ben, of course, not going to play forever, but it seems like they're excited again. Obviously, though, I will say, before we get into the players here, the Cleveland Browns did a great job in their draft as well. And the Browns is the Browns, so I wouldn't be shocked if they go from a great year to not and somehow just messes up. But they should be on paper a very good team. Should still be a very, very good team. And you could argue on paper the Browns are maybe better than the Steelers. You will see. They could even move OBJ because they really don't need him, and that could bring more value in. So that's a good team still. But I don't think the Bengals are ready. I don't think the Ravens actually had a great draft. I think they're maybe further behind the Steelers, even though they have a younger quarterback. So the Steelers are not dead at all, and they had a good draft. We'll see if it's great, though. Mic'd Up here, presented by Martin Lawn Services.
I think you're right when you said Tomlin and Colbert are invigorated.
They look excited.
Trust me, they hear all the despite what they want to tell you, especially Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
They hear what people are saying, that this is the end. Put them, write the obituary. They're dead, too old.
Right.
They think they're going to get a high draft pick. They're playing for draft pick.
Right.
I've said that early on. The Steelers, right or wrong, that organization does not play for high draft. They don't.
What did he tell Chase Young? He told him on the field, "I love you. I never want to be able to draft you. You're too good. If I can draft you, I had a real bad year."
Exactly. They play to win, and they don't mulligan a season.
Right.
So I'm kind of excited for Steeler football, and I'm telling you, come June 1st when they have more cuts, I think this roster. I think they're gonna add a couple more people prior to heading to St. Vincent.
Yeah, if they bring Steven Nelson back because you said that here, I'm going to cut the clip and we're going to throw it everywhere because that would be absolutely hysterical. And yes, he has not been signed. It could happen. And if you look at the money, they could have fit him in. So it is still kind of perplexing how that happened, unless it's because he wanted more money and a bigger contract, which were some of the rumors. But maybe he's been humbled by the fact that he's still out there.
There's another guy out there too that I'm eyeing, and he's not signed yet, and he's a veteran guy, Casey Hayward. He's a cornerback starter. He's with the Chargers. He's done it before. He's still out there. There's people still out there, and there's going to be more cuts coming up here in the next month as teams try to either sign people to extensions or get the draft classes in or whatever. So we'll be talking about more transitions here over the next couple months. I would guess.
Absolutely. And I want to remind all of you, of course, head over to Steelers Now, as well as Pittsburgh Sports Live for video reaction from the draft picks, from Tomlin, from Colbert. Even go back to our draft shows. I cut different clips all over the place. So there's several different clips, several different shows all over there to really give our thoughts prior to the pick, after the pick, or instant reaction. You can hold us accountable over there, Pittsburgh Sports Live. And not just Steelers Now, where there's been draft coverage, also Pittsburgh Sports Now, WV Sports Now, Nittany Sports Now. But, Mike, moving to Pittsburgh Sports Now, the mothership right now, there were some Pitt players that now have NFL homes right now. Jones the second by Minnesota. I think that's a solid fit for him. Weaver getting selected. Hamlin ending up with an NFL home. We'll talk Paris Ford and even Darius Stills, who didn't get drafted here in a moment. But thoughts on the Pitt players that got drafted, that have an NFL home right now. How do you think they are as a fit with those teams? And how do you think they'll do in the NFL if they get a true opportunity?
Well, I think it was a hell of a draft for the Pitt program.
It really was. Yeah.
The most players drafted since 2004. They had the most players drafted in the ACC. They were tied with Penn State and Kentucky for like fifth most as far as per school.
Kentucky's rare. That's a random team.
But the point that I made with those things, and I think it's something that Pat Narduzzi will be able to use as a recruiting tool, and him and his coaching can be very proud of it, is the other teams that were above Pitt, the Alabamas, the Ohio State.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Those schools are getting 4- and 5-star kids that, it's never a guarantee that you're going to get drafted.
Sure.
But it's
close, unless you get hurt or something really wild happens. Yeah.
5 of the 6 Pitt players, the only high-rated player that Pitt got that was drafted was Damar Hamlin, who was a 4th-round pick. Right. You're talking about Patrick Jones, who was a 2-star kid, 3rd-round pick. Michigan dropped Rashad Weaver from their commits, and he had to sign at the last minute with Pitt. They developed him into a 4th-round pick.
Right.
No one talked about Jason Pinnock being a draft pick. He got in the 5th. And the best story was Jimmy Morrissey going from a walk-on to a 7th-round pick of the Raiders. That's tremendous, and it says a lot. I know, fans still want more wins, and rightly so with Pitt. But this shows a sign of development with the program. When you're able to get 6 players put into NFL homes, and it doesn't count the non-drafted guys. I think it was a great fit for Patrick Jones. I think he's going to be him and Jalen Twyman, Mike Zimmer. It's a defensive-oriented team.
They run that 4-3. Yep.
Yeah, that's a perfect home for them. Damar Hamlin's going to make the Buffalo Bills in one way or the other. He's going to. I was shocked. I was shocked. I was surprised he didn't go before the 6th round. I figured he'd maybe be a 4th-round pick.
Right.
I was a little surprised Jason Pinnock went in the 5th round, but I think he shows a lot, and he's the type of cornerbacks that the NFL look for now, in that 6'1" that can run and play physical man-to-man, and that's what he bumped press coverage. That's what he's able to do, and we'll see. I think in Jimmy Morrissey, he's going to make the Raiders in some fashion, whether it's the practice squad or the guy's a baller. He can play center, can play guard. I think it's a great fit. Oakland had a little upheaval, not Oakland, Las Vegas had a little bit of upheaval. They got rid of 3 or 4 offensive linemen, so they're kind of trying to build their line of the future.
Right.
And I think this might be a good opportunity for Jimmy Morrissey. He's not going to start, but I think he could find a way as a swing guy that could play either center or guard.
Yeah, Patrick Jones II really fits into what Minnesota wants to do. I think that's a great pick. DeMar Hamlin's probably the only one that jumps off the page to me in terms of his hype from high school to college, and maybe we're just in the bubble with him being a Central Catholic product. But if somebody would have told you out of Central Catholic that he would have been drafted where he is, he probably would be disappointed. He probably would have thought he was a higher drafted player, especially if he had success with a major program like Pitt. So that's the only one that maybe the player's thinking I maybe lost some money. Maybe I should have been drafted higher. But DeMar Hamlin being motivated and being a little p-hoed is probably good for DeMar Hamlin, good for the Buffalo Bills to have him. That is also a situation which we talked about all through our draft coverage. It's just the truth, and it happens a lot of the time for some of these kids. Sometimes falling, yeah, it costs you money and it sucks, but it actually can put you in a better situation. He is in a situation now that is a team on the precipice of being a championship team.
Yeah.
He has some veterans there that are going to be great teachers to him. The only problem that maybe could be there is they're potentially too loaded, but defensively there's certainly an opening. So I think he really could help that team. They're going to look for help everywhere. And it was also a deeper position than maybe some others. So I think he's in a good spot. I will say, to kind of pivot off, what are your thoughts about Paris Ford, who was that player that if somebody would have told you a year ago, before knowing about a pandemic or COVID-19, this would be Paris's Ford opportunity in the National Football League, I'm sure we all would have fell off our chair or wondered what happened. He was that player that was that diamond for Pitt that could have potentially been the highest drafted player out of all of these. And Pitt having these draft picks, you're right, it will provide talk for recruits. Some naysayer fans may say they should have won more if they had this many drafted player, but they still coached them up. But Paris Ford doesn't have the first, second, third round hype that many thought maybe was the case a year or so ago. Ends up choosing not to play. Kevin Colbert and other GMs made it very clear they're going to not, I wouldn't say hold it against the kid, but they're certainly going to give a bump to a kid that played. And it's not about a political opinion. It's just about you can't be in football shape if you didn't play. Clearly was held against him. What are your thoughts about his NFL future right now?
Well, if you would have told me a year ago that Paris Ford wouldn't have got drafted, I would have thought you knew nothing about football and you were somebody that just hated Pitt. He and maybe Patrick Jones, Rashad Weaver had to prove that he was able to come back from his knee injury, or I would have had him in that group. I thought Patrick Jones was going to be the highest rated Pitt player, followed by Jalen Twyman and Paris Ford. Okay. I thought Paris Ford was going to be one of the best safeties in the country. There's another one, but he screwed up, both with his decision to leave school and what he did when he left, when after leaving school. Because when you get ready for a pro day and you're a safety known for getting sideline to sideline, you can't run have a 40-yard dash time.
As an athlete position.
A 4.9.
Yeah.
The other day, Michael Vick and Rich Eisen's Run, Rich, Run.
Yeah, I saw that.
He ran a 4.7.
Yeah.
And he's 40 years old.
I mean, yeah.
Harris Ford is in the prime of his career, and he ran a 4.9. And just can't happen.
That's just not good any way you slice it. And with his age and the fact that he even played high-level ball, you just feel like if he was trying, it would have been higher. I mean, Michael Vick's a whole different level, but still, it's just bad.
I will say this, though. I think hopefully for Paris, I think he's a good kid. I do. This could be a good situation for him in a couple ways. Number one, I think this is going to humble him.
Yeah.
I don't think you could have told him, even up until draft day, he wouldn't get drafted. Now his eyes are open. He
clearly didn't think this, or else he wouldn't have sat out. He thought he was good enough, had enough tape out there, it wouldn't have mattered.
I even think after that, he still thought, despite the pro day, he kept referencing it on Twitter, my tape. Right. The NFL people didn't give a damn about that.
Not when he's 2 years old.
No, exactly. So hopefully for him, this opens his eyes. This motivates him, which I'm sure it will. And the other good thing is he's going to be with the Rams surrounded by his friend Aaron Donald.
Right.
And there's a guy out there that's Paris Ford is probably going to be with Aaron Donald if he wasn't with him today. Aaron Donald, I would imagine, is going to take him under his wing
Right.
and is going to tell him, he's going to give him tough love and is going to tell him what needs to happen if he wants to be a National Football League player. And I think that maybe is one guy that can hopefully get through to Paris Ford, because I think athletically, there's no doubt he has the ability to play in the National Football League. It's whether he has the motivation and other stuff, the consistency to do that. And if he doesn't, then he'll be back here in Pittsburgh. But if he does,
All right.
he'll have a long career. I think he's a guy that can hang in the NFL, and I think it's going to be a blessing that he was able to get teamed up with one of the best leaders in the National Football League, and Aaron Donald.
It could be a blessing, and I think also you got to realize that, yeah, again, you lost money, but as long as you're in camp somewhere, there's a chance. And even if you're not really, there's with his age, by being in camp, he's going to have a shot to impress. And now all he can do is be in shape, play well, and do the right things. And then everything else will take care of itself. And he'll have more motivation. It will take him a while, though, to get that money back. He definitely lost some cash the last year or so, for sure.
But Pitt wasn't the only team like to have a player. Surprisingly, I don't think in Ford's case it wasn't surprising that he didn't get drafted. But West Virginia went through a similar thing with a guy that
I'm surprised. Yes,
all he did was put up stats at West Virginia, and for whatever reason, that wasn't good enough to get drafted, right?
I am flabbergasted. I almost did fall off my chair while recording draft talk in draft shows. Again, Darius Stills was a first-team Big 12 player in a major conference multiple years running. He was a leader of the defense. He had to deal with the defense dealing with scandal and coaching changes. The only thing that didn't happen for him, and many people that cover the program or are fans of WU have said they wish that he was there, say 3 or 4 years earlier in a different era, because obviously when he was there, it was a time period in flux, going from Dana Holgorsen and Neil Brown, who's still a couple years in. It wasn't the most successful period as a team, but he was an elite player. I did preview shows before WU games all last year, and everyone, whether it be a media member, a writer, a PA announcer, whoever it was, they all said their team is scheming just on Stills. Like, he was the guy that you are up at night thinking about. And obviously a great player in college football does not guarantee you transit to the NFL. But with his success in college and the fact that there were not that many players at his position that were elite. It was one of the few positions that was not deep in this draft. So for him to go undrafted, and then reports of signing with the Vegas Raiders, they'll get an opportunity. But I was surprised, especially a late round pick. I didn't think a first, second, or third, but to go undrafted the whole way through when you're having players that didn't play last year, there were less overall players that were really vying for an opportunity that were even in this draft than the year earlier. I thought he stood out in a major conference. I don't know. Again, I actually threw a tweet out there about that, and then he retweeted, and it's kind of exploded a little bit. I will tell you, Darius still seems mad. He seems motivated. So maybe that'll be some hunger that'll be kicking his pants. But the comparison to Paris Ford's there, because the two players that had tons of hype at schools that we cover that are in the region. But Paris Ford didn't play. Darius Stills played. He was great. I don't know. What you may, is there any thoughts in terms of the thought process? Do you think the Big 12 and the fact that WU was great defensively for a few weeks, but the Big 12 is not known for defense, did that maybe hurt him because points are still being put up against him?
I don't know, but I had this. I saw a couple players tweet this. Rashad Weaver is one of them, and I'm not sure what what his numbers were at West Virginia Pro Day. I don't know if he did average or not what people were expecting. But I'm sorry, I'm old. I don't buy into this. I don't buy into all the players that get moved up. You heard all the draft analysts, whatever network you watched, referencing, what a great pro day, and it was better than their regular season. I'm a guy that believes in tape. What did you do during?
Stills tape's good. It's a good tape.
Yeah. I don't give a damn about what you did at the pro day. I'll make this prediction right now. Baltimore, you mentioned Baltimore. A lot of people thought they took a surprise with the Penn State defensive end Jason Owia. He had no sack. I will say this: Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones will be in the NFL longer. They will have longer NFL careers than just Jason Owea. He only played 8 games in college. He registered no sacks last year at Penn State, but he got put into first round status or high status because of how he ran and lifted at the combine. I'm sorry. Way
Yeah.
too much emphasis, and it's not just him; it's other guys. It was the common theme hearing the commentators talking. I want to see production. I want to see what you're doing when you have your pads on, going against a different team in the fourth quarter, in the third quarter. You can use the pro days as some factor, but I think way too much emphasis is placed on those numbers. But because of that, I think a lot of teams, that's why you see teams swing and misses with picks, because they fall in love with that instead of what they should fall in love with.
Yeah. I am surprised, though, because you're right, but I'm surprised out of all teams, the Ravens seem like and this is not just this year, this is last year too, kind of since they've kind of turned over a new leaf and Ozzie Newsome's no longer running the show, they have been in love with pro day and those numbers. When Ozzie Newsome was there and they were building the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, that type of 15-year run with some of the best defenses in league history, yeah, you got to perform at pro day, but Ray Lewis could pick a guy off off film and call it ball and tell you whether he's going to do well. They just had a gut instinct about certain players. They were Raven-style players. You could watch them in college football and say the Ravens going to go for this guy. Now it doesn't seem like that's the same strategy. And obviously that might be too eye test, not analytical enough for today. But I don't love the Ravens, Chad. I think they are reaching on a lot of players. But back to Stills, again, the only thing I can think of is that maybe he's a little undersized for his position. That's the only thing I could think of. I do think he's motivated. I do think he'll do well. I do think he'll get a shot in the National Football League. I mean, this is a guy, again, 14-plus sacks most of those years. He was a 4-year player, so he had legit college ball under his belt. 278, 6 foot. The hands maybe being a little undersized. Maybe you like him to be a little taller at his position. He is a 4-3 guy, so not every team runs that scheme. But again, I'm surprised he didn't get drafted at all. I really, really am. I know he's amped up about it. I know a lot that covered him were surprised. So we'll see. There's opportunity. There's still players that haven't been signed. There's teams that are going to move things around. Players are going to get hurt. The life as a football player, not over for Darius Stills. But Darius Stills was just so hyped by the whole Big 12 for 4 years. You hate to put it on a program, but it's almost going to look like the program failed him a bit, but I don't know what else could have been done. I mean, there was video out there every 20 minutes.
I want to go one of the tweets I was referencing here. Here it was this. I thought Rashad Weaver retweeted it, but this comes from a Miami Hurricane player. His name's Trey Hill.
Okay.
He tweeted this on Saturday, and Sunday, and I completely agree with it. Cancel the football season and just train for the combine and run fast. You will get drafted.
Right.
I totally buy into what that guy's saying.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder. Aside from you can't cancel the season. You can't.
Right. Obviously, yeah.
Because obviously,
right.
That's not going to go over well. But if you are going to end your season early or whatever, you better do the right thing. You better get with the right trainers. You better be committed and make sure that come pro day time or the combine time, you put up your best effort. Because if you do that, that could wipe away some of your sins from the regular season.
Yeah, and it's more of what you did lately. People, if you were great last year or early in a season and then you get hurt, and yeah, there are some agents that have been able to get players still drafted, Willis McGahee years ago, et cetera, after getting hurt in the national title game. But unless you're really like that guy that's getting national coverage all the time, first round skills, if you're a middle rounder and you have a bad few weeks and then you don't perform in the pro day, yeah, you can go from 4th, 5th, or 6th to unsigned, undrafted free agent looking to sign somewhere and unsigned maybe as we're speaking now at this point in the calendar year. So, yeah, that's very, very true. And also it might make teams and players think, again, if players who are even highly touted choose to skip a pro day because they say, I got all the film. I don't want to get hurt. What else do I need to do? Teams clearly are looking at that pro day. What else you need to do is do it at the pro day, unfortunately. That certainly seems to to be the case. Well, we're going to be talking about this for a while. I mean, you obviously can be evaluating these players for a while. We're not yet at even rookie minicamp, but now it really gets started with a new era of Steeler football, a new life for many of these college kids to now get a shot in the National Football League. Got to be excited about that. All the coverage is going to be at all those network sites, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Steelers Now, WV Sports Now, Nittany Sports Now, etc. We'll have all video reaction here at Pittsburgh Sports Live. So that'll do it for this morning edition of our Monday morning quarterbacking after the NFL draft. And again, you can still find all of that gauntlet marathon broadcast that I hosted those days through the first all the way to the third round, and then clips all over the place over there at Pittsburgh Sports Live. For Mike Vukovcan, I'm Mike Asti. For all of us at PSL, PSN, etc. And for Martin Lawn Services, where you can call Doug Martin at 412-849-5894. Enjoy the rest of your day. Keep it here for all the coverage. Check out the websites. And buckle your seatbelts, because now I feel like a new NFL year has started once we are done with the draft. It was a great draft, but there's tons of intrigue now moving forward.